A pleasant evening and a very warm welcome to the national news of Rupavahini on ChannelEye. I'm Delanjali Anand. Joining me is Charita Minipurarachi, and these are the top stories which have made headlines for tonight. Yuan Wang 5 Chinese vessel reaches Hambantota port. Minister Bandula says the ban on 6 Tamil organizations revoked following appropriate investigations. State official to coordinate the supply of fuel for farmers. A committee to oversee and grant prior approval for new appointments and changes in state corporations, statutory boards and state-owned enterprises. Health authorities urge to direct attention on children with the rapid spread of COVID-19. Several explosions at a Russian military camp neighboring Crimea. Now, the controversial Chinese scientific research vessel Yuan Wang 5 arrived at the Hambantota port in Sri Lanka today.
The Chinese vessel is scheduled to dock at the port until the August 22nd. The Chinese vessel was scheduled to dock at the Hambantota port on August 11th. However, Ministry of Foreign Affairs gave permission for the ship to anchor at the port on last Saturday. Yuan Wang 5 is a dual-use space research and survey vessel employed for space and satellite tracking and with specific usage in intercontinental ballistic missile launches. The 222-meter long and 25.2-meter wide vessel has state-of-the-art tracking technology on board of Transoceanic Aerospace Observation. Permission has been granted under the conditions to keep the automatic identification system switched on within the exclusive economic zone of Sri Lanka and not to conduct any scientific research in Sri Lankan waters. Subsequently, the government requested the Embassy of China by a diplomatic note dated on the August 5th to defer the visit of the vessel to Hambantota port until the conduct of further consultations. Security clearance from the Ministry of Defence from the visit of the vessel for replenishment purposes during the speculated period was granted on July 7th. Telecommunications Regulatory Commission also issued a no-objection letter for the use of frequencies and communication equipment subjected to non-interference and non-protection basis. The Foreign Ministry exchanged views and opinions among relevant stakeholders in government, including the Ministry of Defence, the Sri Lanka Navy and the Telecommunication Regulatory Commission as accepted practice related to such requests for diplomatic clearance. The Ministry reiterates Sri Lanka's policy of cooperation and friendship with all countries. Security and cooperation in the neighbourhood is of utmost priority. It is Sri Lanka's intention to safeguard the legitimate interest of all countries in keeping with its international obligations. Ambassador of China in Colombo, Si Chang-hong, and the leaders of the independent 10-party coalition, including parliamentarians Venerable Atulli Ratanathera and Vimal Veeravansha, were present at the ceremony held to welcome the Chinese vessel at the Hambantota port. Chinese Ambassador Si Chang-hong said that Yuan Wang 5 sailed more than 30 days. He added that the ship came to Sri Lanka's shores when encountering many unexpected challenges and obstacles. He further said that the Hambantota port is a key point in the One Belt and One Road initiative. He also said that this occasion is a symbolic representation, highlighting the Sri Lanka's China friendship and cooperation. He added that this occasion can also be considered as a mechanism to stabilize and improve the Sri Lankan economy. He said that this also marks the 65th anniversary of China-Sri Lanka diplomatic relations. He pointed out that the relations shared by the country elaborates the deep-rooted friendship of both the nations.
It's capable of tracking and surveying using today's technology. It is clearly evident that during the time at Shanghai, technologies of a different nature will have existed to make it possible for him to track and survey during the medical expeditions undertaken by him in what we call today the Indo-Pacific. Hence, the arrival of Yuan Wang 5 should be considered a repetition of this tradition. China being a permanent member in the United Nations Security Council with veto power, always protected Sri Lanka in international forums. China's support to Sri Lanka at Human Rights Council is highly appreciated by the Sri Lankan government and the people. Dear friends, Sri Lanka is currently undergoing its worst economic crisis since its independence. We need the support and blessings of all our international friends for us to recover sooner or later. We hope and request China, our long-standing friend, to assist us restructuring our debts and secure an IMF bailout as soon as possible and provide with some meaningful bridging finance. If we have the support, resilience and understanding of the international community, and particularly our Chinese friend, it will become a great step forward in resetting Sri Lanka's economy, which will eventually benefit our creditors and investors and the citizens alike.
Results of Yuan Bank 5 is a symbol of the independence and sovereign power of Sri Lanka. A controversy was unnecessarily raised about the arrival of Yuan Bank 5, and it was also a machination of the Western powers headed by US. However, the righteous decision prevailed. We hope this friendship, the long-lasting friendship, cannot be torpedoed by any kind of machination of imperialism. We trust we will be able to keep our bonds firm and unbreakable and ensure the peace in the Indian Ocean and the freedom in the Indian Ocean. And Sri Lanka will always hold the flag of freedom of navigation in the Indian Ocean, and to be able to welcome today Yuan Bank 5, major step in the direction of developing relationships between our two countries. We know how the world is presently divided, and we know how the world machinations are today directed at peaceful countries, as China has shown from a century ago, no intentions of subordination of any nation, no intentions of colonization of any country. So the flag of China remains the flag of freedom together with the flag of Sri Lanka.
Now, the cabinet spokesman, Minister Bandula Gunawardene, says the ban imposed on 6 Tamil organizations was revoked following an inquiry conducted for a period of 6 months. He made these remarks during a media briefing held in Colombo today to announce the cabinet decisions.
Minister Bandula Gunawardene said that the defence authorities decided to revoke the ban considering the recommendations made through studies conducted over the activities of the organizations during the said period. He said that the relevant ban was lifted with respect to the UN regulations flowing throughout investigations. He also said that 3 of the organizations have been listed as blacklisted organizations. The relevant gazette notification of a listing has also been issued. He said that the lifting of the ban on 6 organizations was not carried out with the intention of attracting tourist foreign investments. Minister Gunawardene also said that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs took steps to resolve the issue pertaining to the Chinese vessel without inflicting any harm on the other stakeholders. The minister said that Sri Lanka has welcomed many other warships from USA, United Kingdom, Pakistan, India as well as in China. He said that such arrivals are permitted as long as a third party is not affected or would not be subjected to any other issue. Accordingly, he said that under such policies, permissions was granted for the Chinese vessel to dock at the port. He added that the neighbouring India raised certain concerns over the ship arrival. The minister said that the government requested the Chinese vessel to depart from arriving into the country until the negotiations with India were concluded. Accordingly, he said that the negotiations were carried out with both Indian and Chinese authorities to avoid implications on any third party from this issue. He also said that the Chinese government has also been provided with relevant privileges and granted for other nations and provided necessary facilities. He said that Sri Lanka also followed the traditions of a non-aligned national policy and pointed out that Sri Lanka has received many nations' support across the world throughout the history. He said that the Foreign Affairs Minister and the Ministry have also acted responsibly in this matter, causing any implications among friendly nations with this country. Minister Gunawardene said that President Ranil Wickremesinghe submitted a report to the Cabinet of Ministers yesterday over the present situation of the proposed all-party government. Minister Bandula Gunawardena said that the President submitted a full report of the political parties took part in the media briefing from the beginning. He added that the decisions are still underway. He said that this is an effort to reach a common agreement towards a political, social and economic program to uplift the country. The minister added that the final decisions over the executive councils of the parliament and division of parliamentary responsibilities and post among the ruling party and the position will be reached within the next 2 weeks.
The Ministry of Defence has decided to delist 6 blacklisted organizations and 316 individuals for financing terrorism and related activities. The ministry reached this decision following lengthy discussions and a careful study. According to the blacklisting and delisting of persons, 577 individuals and 18 organizations were blacklisted in the year 2021 for financing terrorism under the United Nations Regulation number 01 of 2012. After a series of discussions and careful study conducted at the Ministry of Defence by a committee consisting of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Attorney General's Department, key intelligence agencies, law enforcing agencies and financial intelligence unit of the Central Bank of Sri Lanka, and based on reports and evidences with regard to the financing terrorism by individuals and organizations, recommendations were submitted for the listing and delisting. Accordingly, a decision was made to delist 316 individuals and 6 organizations since they no longer continue to fund terrorist activities. It has been decided to blacklist 55 individuals and 3 organizations, those recently recognized as active in financing terrorism during the period. Thus, forwarding the recommendations of the Ministry of Defence to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs on June 29, 2022 for their consent, 316 individuals and 15 organizations were blacklisted on August 1st by Extraordinary Gazette number 2291/02. The statement issued by the Defence Ministry has indicated that relevant authorities will remain vigilant on the activities of the delisted individuals and organizations and will ban them again if raising of funds or financing terrorism is resumed. Now, President Ranil Wickremesinghe has taken steps to introduce national guidelines and minimum standards for child development centres in Sri Lanka.
And meanwhile, the cabinet approval has been granted for the relevant cabinet paper submitted by President Wickremesinghe. Guidelines and policies prepared at the provincial level for child development centres are already being implemented in order to provide quality services for future children. However, there was a lack of nationally recognised guidance. The initial draft of the national guidelines and minimum standards for child development centres was initiated in 2013. The national guideline presented by the National Child Protection Authority is scheduled to be implemented across the country, covering all child development centres. Steps have been taken to introduce these national guidelines and minimum standards under the supervision and guidance of relevant experts representing all stakeholders related to the childcare sector. It was initiated with a study of the minimum standards available at the international level, and since then these guidelines and standards have been prepared by incorporating these facts of child development, law, health and childcare in several stages. These national guidelines and standards have been formulated with the contribution of experts in the field as well as officers and staff working in child development centres. 6 main areas related to childcare are covered under the National Code of Guidelines and Standards. Proposals are to be considered in terms of these standards on the establishment and registration of child development centres, staffing of child development centres, institutionalization and resocialization of children, standards for physical environment and safety, child health and welfare and complaint handling, inspection and supervision of centres. Proposals are to be considered in terms of these standards on the establishment and registration of children development centres, staffing of child development centres, institutionalization and resocialization of children, standards for physical environment and safety, child health and welfare and complaint handling, inspection and supervision of the centres. And meanwhile, the cabinet approval has been granted for a program towards a democratic, prosperous and disaster risk-reduced Sri Lanka.
Accordingly, US agency has provided a grant worth $65 million to Sri Lanka for this program. The relevant proposal was presented by President Ranil Wickremesinghe. Cabinet approval granted to issue a joint stamp in Sri Lanka and India is in commemoration of India's Independence Day. An MOU is expected to be signed between the postal departments of both the nations. The relevant proposal was presented by Minister Bandula Gunawardena. The Cabinet approval was granted to prepare a draft bill based on the draft prepared with regard to the establishment of a Chartered Journalists Institution of Sri Lanka. The relevant draft has been prepared by a committee led by the Secretary to the Ministry of Mass Media. Cabinet approval was also granted to revise the Chartered Journalists Institute of Sri Lanka into Chartered Mass Media Professionals Institute of Sri Lanka. The Cabinet approval has also been granted to legally allocate a land belonging to the Railways Department for the Al Safa Primary School in Navalapitiya. The relevant proposal was presented by the Minister of Education and the Minister of Highways. The Al Safa Primary School was commenced on 2013 under the programme to re-establish 1,000 secondary schools. The Cabinet Subcommittee has been appointed to organise the 75th Independence Day celebrations scheduled on February 4th of 2023. The committee will be presided over by the President with the membership of 8 ministers. Cabinet approval has been granted to sign an MOU between Sri Lanka and Nepal governments for cooperation on the sectors of science, technology and innovations. The relevant proposal was presented by Minister Susil Premchand. Now, Sri Lanka has been included into the Developing Countries Trading Scheme introduced by the British government.
The United Kingdom has launched this scheme to extend tariff cuts to hundreds of products from developing countries, including Sri Lanka. The Developing Countries Trading Scheme covers 65 countries, including Sri Lanka. The scheme extends tariff cuts to hundreds more products exported from developing countries, which expands beyond the US scheme. Sri Lanka is among 8 countries under the scheme enhanced framework that will receive a preference for 0% import tariff on 2/3 of product lines. The scheme reduces and removes 2 tariffs reduced or removed by the EU GSP. This scheme replaces the UK Generalised Scheme of Preferences, which was rolled off from EU membership and will come into force in early 2023. Duties will also be reduced by 12% on baby clothes from Sri Lanka. The scheme will ensure British business benefits from more than 750 billion sterling pounds a year of reduced import cost, which is expected to lead to more choice and lower cost for UK consumers to help with the cost of living.
Now, Minister Ali Sabri met the Colombo-based ambassadors and high commissioners yesterday for a briefing on current developments ahead of the 51st session of the Human Rights Council in Geneva. The minister outlined the current developments in Sri Lanka, including the democratic transition of office in accordance with the Constitution. Attorney General Sanjay Rajaratnam, Foreign Secretary Aruni Vijayawardena and Finance Secretary Mahinda Siriwardena also contributed to the briefing. The minister outlined several areas of progress already visible in addressing some of the immediate challenges, which has led to a greater degree of stability for the people. On the political front, the minister briefed regarding the work underway towards forming an all-party government. He also recalled that the 22nd Amendment to the Constitution, which effectively restores the 19th Amendment, has been gazetted and is before the Parliament. This measure will contribute towards strengthening parliamentary democracy, oversight of the executive branches of government and the independence of key institutions. He also explained the progress that has been initiated towards a comprehensive review of the PTA. The government is taking focused measures to mitigate the adverse impact of the current economic situation on the vulnerable sectors of the population in order to ensure the economic and social rights of the people and to prevent further disparities. The minister also noted that despite the unprecedented situation in the country in recent years, including in the aftermath of the COVID pandemic, advancements have been made in the area of human rights and reconciliation through domestic processes. The government is in the process of building a consensus so that further progress can be made on matters related to human rights, justice and equity. The foreign minister emphasized that Sri Lanka will continue its constructive engagement with the Human Rights Council at the upcoming 51st session. During the discussion that followed the presentation, the President Coordinator of the United Nations, Hana Singha Hamdi, expressed appreciation for the consistent efforts of the government in facing the challenges and expanding the social safety net of vulnerable groups. She also acknowledged the review of the PTA. The UN resident coordinator announced that the United Nations will be partnering with the government of Sri Lanka on a 5-year framework of cooperation which will include areas of social and economic rights and social cohesion, among others.
And meanwhile, the ambassador of Iran, Hashim Asjadiza, calls on Minister of Foreign Affairs Ali Sabri yesterday. The meeting was held at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. The Foreign Ministry referred to the long-standing cordial relations and braved the ambassador of the economic downturn that Sri Lanka is encountering at present and tangible measures so far taken by the government to stabilize the situation. Ambassador Asjadiza emphasized the importance of the Sri Lanka-Iraq bilateral relationship assured to continue the assistance of the Republic of Iran to Sri Lanka. A decision has been reached to appoint an officer attached to the Ministry of Agriculture to coordinate the supply of fuel required for cultivation and harvesting activities of the farmers. The minister made these remarks during a media briefing held today.
Minister Mahinda Amaravira said that all steps have been taken to supply fuel for farmers at a fair price rate. He said that no shortage of rice prevails in the market and a maximum rate has been given for rice in an attempt to challenge the monopoly in the market. He said that rice will not be imported to Sri Lanka following the harvest of the Maha season in next February.
ඉස්සර මතකනේ හැමදාම රැයට ගිහිල්ලා පෙන්නන්නේ කෝ හාල් නැහැ ඇමති කිව්වට කොහෙද හාල් තියෙන්නේ කියලා. දැන් බලන්න ගිහිල්ලා කඩවල හාල් නිගයක් තියෙනවා නම් කියන්න අපි එතනට දවසෙන් යවන්න හාල් තියෙනවා. අපි අභියෝගේ බාරගත්. අපි උපරිම සිල්ලර මිලක් තියෙනවා. සහතික මිල. ඒ මිලට හෝ ඊට අඩුවෙන් තමයි විකිනෙන්නේ. වැඩි මිලට විකිනෙන්නෙත් ඉඩ දෙන්නේ. හැම ඒකාධිකාරයක්ම අපි බිඳලා තියෙනවා. පෝර ඒකාධිකාරයක් තිබුණා 40000ට උඩින්. ඒක දැන් 10000ට 15000ට ඇවිල්ලා තියෙනවා. එතකොට හාල් ඒකාධිකාරයක් තිබුණා රුපියල් 300ට ගෙනියා. ඒක දැන් අපි පාලන මිලටත් අඩුවෙන් ගෙනල්ලා තියෙනවා. ලබන මාස කන්නේ අස්වැන්න පෙබරවාරි මාසෙ එන්න පටන් ගන්නවා. ඊට පස්සේ ලංකාවට හාල් ගේන්නේ නැහැ. වෙච්ච වැරද්ද වුණා. ඊට පස්සේ වැරද්ද වෙන්න ඉඩ තියන්නේ.
The first stock of the first consignment of 44,000 metric tons of urea received from India has been distributed among the farmers in Jaffna district. Now, the former president, Maithripala Sirisena, says their cooperation will be extended for the positive work carried out by the government to save people from the prevailing economic crisis.
The former president made these remarks while addressing a ceremony in Modhera. Former President Maithripala Sirisena said that all parties should keep their differences aside and come together to resolve issues faced by the people. He said that the situation created in the course of past 3 years cannot be undone with a couple of days. He said that his foreign policy was similar to former Prime Minister late Sirimao Bandaranaike's foreign policy, which allowed his government to work with other nations when a friendly environment. However, he said that the country has been distanced from the friendly nations in the last 3 years and a massive effort should be taken to rebuild these relations. President Ranil Wickremesinghe has appointed a committee to oversee and grant prior approval for new appointments or changes to the existing positions of chairpersons and directors of state corporations, statutory boards and state-owned enterprises.
President Secretary Samaneka Naika will chair the committee, including Prime Minister Secretary Anura Dissanayake and Cabinet Secretary WMJ DJ Fernando. President's Additional Secretary Chaminda Kularatne will serve as the secretary of this committee. In the event, it is required to change the positions of chairpersons or board of directors of state corporations, statutory boards and state-owned enterprises. It is mandatory to submit nominations to the above committee with justifiable reasons and obtain prior approval. As per the statement issued by the President's Media Division, this committee has been appointed paying heed to the written requests made to the President periodically to change the positions of chairpersons and board of directors of state corporations, statutory boards and state-owned enterprises without prior agreement and certain informal appointments. Accordingly, a letter has been sent directly to all the secretaries of ministries under the signature of the President's Secretary, and copies have been sent to the Prime Minister's Secretary and the Ministry of Finance, Economic Stabilisation and National Policy for the implementation of the necessary arrangements.
Minister Nimal Siripal de Silva instructed the Civil Aviation Authority to prepare a systematic program together with the Ceylon Petroleum Corporation and to provide fuel required for each airlines arriving in Sri Lanka. The minister pointed out the importance in providing fuel for flights arriving and departing Sri Lanka without any hindrance. A discussion over the measures should be taken to restabilize the aviation industry was held this morning. Minister Nimal Siripal De Silva presided over this meeting. The number of flights arriving in the department Sri Lanka has considerably declined due to difficulties in acquiring jet fuel. Aviation companies who took part in the discussions pointed out that the Katunayak International Airport will be the destination for many flights for the upcoming tourist season. Therefore, they emphasized the importance of the continuous supply of fuel for flights. The minister emphasized that if Ceylon Petroleum Corporation is unable to ensure sufficient fuel supply for flights, then private sector should be given the opportunity to import fuel. CPC representatives said that from August 20th, 600 metric tons of fuel can be issued daily from the Sapukaskanda refinery with the arrival of 2 crude oil shipments.
A specialist consultant of Lady Ridgeway Hospital for Children in Colombo, Dr. Vipal Pereira, says a significant attention should be directed on children with the prevailing COVID-19 outbreak in the country. He emphasized the importance in adhering to health guidelines for children, and the parents should be more considerate in their well-being. Dr. Vipal Pereira said that 15 dengue patients and 8 COVID patients are currently admitted at the Children's Hospital. He pointed out that 2 of the COVID patients are currently receiving treatments in the ICU. He said that with the rise of COVID-19 outbreak in the country, children are experiencing symptoms of wheezing. He added that the symptoms is considered as a post-COVID condition. He pointed out the importance in adhering to health guidelines to avoid further spread and urged to receive their relevant vaccines without fail.
And now let's take a look at a few local news items. Veteran journalist Yogeshwara P. Senadhira has been appointed as the advisor to the Prime Minister for mass media. The new advisor to the Prime Minister is a past student of Ananda College, Colombo, and a graduate from the University of New Delhi. He completed his postgraduate degree at the University of Cambridge. He has served previously as Director for International Media under Presidents Mahinda Rajapaksa, Maithripala Sirisena and Gotabaya Rajapaksa. The unveiling of electric three-wheelers converted by David Perez Limited was held with the participation of US Ambassador in Colombo, Joe Leichung. An MOU was also signed with US aid agency during this event.
And that's all we have on local news. Stay tuned for international stories coming up next.
කොළඹදී විශ්වාසයෙන් ට්‍රීට් කරන්න. Prima Treats. Life is a treat.
Welcome back with international news. A week after an apparent Ukrainian attack on a Russian military base occupied Crimea, an arms store at another military facility has been hit by a series of explosions.
Russian officials said a fire triggered the blast in the Ganskoye area before blaming sabotage. A separate fire broke out at a power substation and a railway was damaged. A string of blasts last week destroyed Russian warplanes at a Black Sea base on the Crimean coast. Ukraine has never publicly admitted the attack, but Presidential Office Advisor Mikhailo Podolyak described the latest incident as demilitarization in action, indicating that the explosions were not accidental. A Ukrainian Air Force command spokesman said the base was used by some of Russia's military helicopters, but blamed the blasts on Russian failing to observe fire precautions.
And moving to Kenya, the Electoral Commission of Kenya announced that Kenya's Deputy President William Ruto has been elected as the country's next president. Ruto won with 50.49% of the vote, narrowing defeating veteran opposition leader and former Prime Minister Raila Odinga, who was contesting his 5th election. He will become Kenya's 5th president since independence, winning the seat on his first attempt. Ruto's party, the Kenya's First Coalition, has won a majority of seats in Kenya's Senate, the second highest in the National Assembly. Supporters of William Ruto, Kenya's president-elect, celebrate the Eldoret town on yesterday.
Prima Kotami Pantan.
Welcome back. On sports news now, Kusal Mendes-led Reds team managed to win the Invitational T20 Championship organised by Sri Lanka Cricket. They won the finals against Dhananjay De Silva's led Blues team.
The finals was held at our Premadasa Stadium in Colombo yesterday. Winning the toss, Reds invited the Blues to bat first. Accordingly, Blues managed to score 136 runs for the loss of 6 wickets in their stipulated 20 overs. Ashwin Bandara scored 40 runs for the Blues. Reds in response managed to chase down the target of 137 with 7 wickets in hand at the 16th over of their innings. Kusal Mendis scored 56 runs and Wanindu Hasaranga scored 24. Kusal Mendis was named as the man of the match. Praveen Javikrama was named the best bowler and the tournament while Asta Fernando was named the man of the series.
Now, Minister Roshan Ranasinghe says he believes that sports in Sri Lanka has a potential to be taken to a higher level in the international arena. The minister made these remarks while taking part in a program held at the National Sports Council auditorium today.
The program was held with the participation of Sports Minister Ranasinghe and Chairman of the National Sports Council Arjuna Ranatunga. The program was held to discuss on the mental hopes of the athletes in the high performance squad. 35 athletes are included in the high performance squad with the potential to secure medals for Sri Lanka in the international stage.
And that's all the news we have for tonight. Do join us tomorrow at 8:50 p.m. for the very latest on ChannelEye. I'm Delanjali together with Charita signing off. Good night.
Good night.